Hello and welcome. Many studies have been made regarding Bible prophecy, and here on Search for Truth today, your Bible teacher Brian Johnston is taking a further look at more prophecy from the Bible book of Daniel. Today's talk is number 6 in this Minutes to Midnight series, and it's called The People of the Coming Prince. So now, here's Brian.
Thanks, John. One of the verses that has been at the centre of Bible prophecy relating to the end of world empires is Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26. We should, as always, read it in its context. The context is God's programme for his people Israel. This programme is in 70 units, usually translated as 70 weeks, although that can be somewhat confusing until we as Daniel's readers get used to the idea that each unit of 7 is not an actual literal week. That is not a week of 7 days, but a so-called week of 7 years. Where this can be seen most clearly is in the final Bible book of Revelation, which makes it explicit that half of the final week of the same program amounts to 42 months, or in other words, 3.5 years. We may assume that there's consistency throughout God's entire prophetic program for Israel, meaning that 70 of these weeks, each week of 7 years, equals a total of 490 years. 77s. The further confirmation of this is found in the fact that Daniel was writing of these things while in exile. That historic exile of Israel in Babylon, the period of Israel being away from the promised land, was plainly stated as lasting for 70 years. God explained that this specific time gap was related to the fact that in Israel's chronic disobedience, they'd failed to observe the practice of allowing their land to remain fallow or unused for 1 in every 7 years. And so God demanded all the land Sabbaths that had been missed for the previous 490 years, 1 year in every 7 from the 490 in total, and so that makes 70. The land would have all the missing rest periods due to it all at once for the whole of Israel's exile away from it. What we're saying is that at the time of Daniel, God in judgment had been looking back over 490 years, and equally now in prophecy he was looking forward for 490 years, and these are the 77s or 70 weeks of Daniel's prophecy. Here we read about them in Daniel chapter 9 from verse 24. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the wrongdoing, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for guilt, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with streets and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. And he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate, until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, gushes forth on the one who makes desolate. We notice that there's a further subtlety here. The 70 weeks are split into 7 plus 62 plus 1. At the end of the 7 plus 62 weeks, so at the end of 69 weeks, Christ was crucified. After this, and concerning the city where Christ was crucified, that is Jerusalem, we read of even to the end there will be war. We find ourselves still living in that period today. Jerusalem isn't at peace. It's currently divided and troubled. Then we read that the prince who is to come will make a 7-year peace deal or a covenant for 1 week. This is clearly someone different from the Messiah, who was previously mentioned as having been cut off. This coming prince is yet another way of speaking about the Antichrist. And this final week, Daniel's 70th, the one that completes God's program for Israel, is the very same 7-year period that's described in great detail between Revelation chapter 6 and 19. In other words, its future. The end of this 70th week for Israel will coincide with the time of the end of world empires. This takes place at the time known as the Day of the Lord. Then at that time, world sovereignty will be restored to Israel, and Christ, the Messiah, will be king over the earth. What many Bible students have also picked up from this section we read, and from verse 26 in particular, is a clue as to the identity, or the nationality at least, of this future prince known as the Antichrist, who will break the deal that he earlier brokered with Israel, the deal that will seem to bring peace for a while to the troubled Middle East. And what's the clue that we're talking about? Well, we're told that in historical times, after Christ's death, the people of the coming prince would destroy Jerusalem and its temple. This means we need to examine the historical data behind the events of AD 70 when this actually happened, as had been predicted. Forces then, under the command of the Roman general Titus, ransacked and burned Jerusalem. Notice, it's the people of the prince that we're interested in. It could so easily be assumed that most of the soldiers Titus commanded at that time were Italians or European. However, both historical testimony and the consensus of modern scholarship tell us that very few of the soldiers who destroyed the temple and Jerusalem in AD 70 were actual Europeans. This is significant, as the people of the prince doesn't refer to the kingdom or empire under which the people lived or served, but rather it refers to the people themselves. Before the Roman Empire became an empire, it was called the Roman Republic. In the early days of the Republic, the majority of the soldiers recruited to serve in the Roman armies were Italians from Rome and the nearby regions. But as the empire expanded, it became impossible to man the entire empire with soldiers only from Italy. After Augustus' reforms in AD 15, the only portion of the Roman army that continued to consist largely of Italians from Rome proper was the Praetorian Guard, an elite military unit whose job was to specifically guard the emperor and the tents of the generals. The remainder of the army was increasingly composed of what were known as provincials, citizens who lived in the provinces, the outer fringes of the empire, away from the capital of Rome. This happened with all the Roman legions of this time period, but most certainly it was the case for the eastern legions used to attack Jerusalem. Tacitus, who was both a senator and a historian of the Roman Empire, spoke of the Roman attack of Jerusalem under Titus in AD 70, and he talks about extra legions from Syria and some drawn from Alexandria as being present. He says the force was accompanied by a strong contingent of Arabs who hated the Jews with the usual hatred of neighbours. Josephus, another historian from this period, confirms Tacitus' report. Again, he reveals that the Roman legions used to attack Jerusalem were stationed in Syria. All of these legions would have consisted of a majority of eastern soldiers, Arabs, Syrians, Egyptians, etc. This means that the soldiers in the eastern provinces that destroyed Jerusalem and the temple were in fact eastern peoples, the inhabitants of Asia Minor, Syria, Arabia, and Egypt. In other words, they were the ancestors of the modern-day inhabitants of the Middle East. This shows us that the people of the prince were not Europeans, but Middle Eastern peoples. In this case, the indicated ethnicity of the future world leader can be updated from European to Middle Eastern. Remember we read from Daniel, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. This obviously hasn't happened yet, as far as Israel is concerned. The Messiah being cut off refers to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. While it was to take place after the completion of the 69 weeks, the wording avoided saying that it was during the 70th week. That indicates a gap between the 69th week and the 70th week. When the Jews crucified Jesus, the Messiah whom God had sent, it was as though Daniel's clock stopped ticking. In other words, the final 7 years of the prophecy, the 70th week, hasn't happened yet. The events of the book of Revelation are future, but soon to begin.
As usual, I remind you that if you'd like a document of Brian's studies, you can freely download a soft copy of the book that contains this whole series. It's called Minutes to Midnight. Just go online to churchesofgod.info/search-for-truth. Now, if you prefer a hard copy book, then you also have that option in the site address I just gave. Here it is again. churchesofgod.info/search-for-truth. And once you're on the site, you'll find details about our partner publishers and how to order. There'll be a charge, of course, for any books provided by online retailers. If you'd like a contact address and get in touch with us with any comments or questions, then it's here. It's churchesofgod.info/contact, and we'd love to hear from you. Now, if you don't use the internet at all, then please write to our postal address instead. It's Search for Truth, Hayes Press, The Barn, Flaxlands, Royal Wootton Bassett, Swindon, SN4 8DY, UK. Our email address is sft@churchesofgod.info. Well, it's been a real pleasure for me to enjoy your company today. Thanks for sharing your time. I do hope you're enjoying this series of studies, and if you are, then why not tell us? Because our contact page address is, again, churchesofgod.info/contact. Next week, Brian's study talk has the title, A Multi-Force Invasion of Israel. Sounds interesting, and I hope you'll be able to join me. But until then, it's goodbye. Very best wishes from our Bible teacher Brian, studio producer David, our singers, and me, John. So, mind how you go, do take care, see you again soon, and in the meantime, we wish you God's richest blessings.